You know, guys, the reason that I decided for this video to be a commentary instead of an actual video is because I want you to be able to imagine some of the things that I'm saying. I'm not going to do some corny exercise where I ask you to close your eyes and imagine green pastures and clouds above you. But if you can actually use your imagination on this and imagine this happening in real life, it'll make the experience better. And maybe, just maybe, the message that I'm trying to get across will work better. So to start things out, I want to establish what this video is. What this video is my idea for a new way for the WWE to introduce new talent to its audience. Right now, NXT is a complete and utter failure. The only good thing to come out of NXT is Daniel Bryan, and because he went through the NXT system, he had massive handcuffs placed on him immediately when he entered the company. So other than that, they haven't really had too many successes. You could say Wade Barrett, but let's face it, one Intercontinental Championship doesn't really do too much for you unless you really count those main events with John Cena and Randy Orton that he had, which, really, how much did that do for him when they put him back on SmackDown and completely reset him? Not a lot. The only other real success that the NXT system has produced, and this is completely irrelevant at this point, was Alex Riley, who had a solid run and a couple of pay-per-view matches with The Miz, but has really just not been seen since. The guy's been relegated to superstars, and there's not a lot that he has going for him right now. So this entire video is me trying to restart the NXT concept. Not necessarily actually do an NXT Season 6 or 5 or 38 or wherever they're at this point, because I know that this most recent season has been going on for nearly 40 weeks, if not more, and that's just idiocy in my opinion. So this is what's going to happen here. Vince McMahon's music hits on Raw, and he comes out and gets on the mic, and he says something to the effect of, "I acknowledge that I haven't done a good enough job of giving young and up-and-coming stars a platform to establish themselves and really connect with you, the WWE Universe. I really tried to do that with NXT, and while I did succeed to a small degree, you all know Daniel Bryan, Wade Barrett, and Alex Riley, of course, that just isn't good enough for me. My first mistake was relying on established stars mentoring rookies instead of helping them to get better by competing against them. In the sports entertainment business, the way that you get better in this very ring is by competing against superstars that are better than you. Because if you're only ever going against people that are on the same level or below you, you're never going to get better. You're going to hit a plateau. The NXT program did reasonably well during its first season and most of its second season, but since the Sci-Fi Network dropped it due to a lack of interest, the WWE.com show has seen dwindling numbers, and that isn't good enough for me. I want to provide a true opportunity for young and upcoming stars to prove that they are good enough to be called a champion in the WWE, and I want to do it the right way this time. We're going to be pulling the plug on the NXT brand, however, we will not pull the plug on the concept. Next Tuesday night, we're going to have our first ever episode of what I am dubbing WWE Ascension at 10 o'clock Eastern Time on WWE.com, and we will be establishing a roster between tonight and then. To start off, I'd like to introduce who I have officially named the general manager of the new Ascension brand, Mr. William Regal. As Mr. Regal's music hits, he comes out to the ring and shakes hands with Mr. McMahon. Thank you very much, Mr. McMahon. If it's alright, I'd like to ask the Raw roster to join us out here, as well as Raw General Manager John Laurinaitis. Again, we have Raw's theme song, Burn It to the Ground by Nickelback, playing while the roster floods the top of the ramp. John Laurinaitis comes into the ring and shakes both of the other guys' hands. Mr. Laurinaitis, because we do need an initial roster on Ascension, Mr. McMahon here has agreed to let me choose from Raw and from SmackDown one former WWE or World Heavyweight Champion, as well as 4 other superstars that have never held either of those belts. That's 5 superstars from each of those brands, totaling 10 superstars. In addition to that, we're going to be keeping 5 superstars that are already on the NXT product that don't get TV time on Raw or SmackDown, and we're going to be bringing up 5 developmental superstars to make an even roster of 20. Because I do understand that there are some superstars that are quote-unquote untouchable, I'd like you to choose 5 of your Raw superstars that will be immune from what Mr. McMahon and I have been calling the Ascension Draft. Laurinaitis responds, He thanks Regal. He says, I'm going to make my decision tonight, but I need time to think. Let me get back to you. And all throughout that night, you would have the segments backstage, superstars interacting with Laurinaitis, either saying, John, you've got to make me immune. I don't want to go to this show. Or, better yet, John, you know what? I don't like you. I don't want you to make me immune. This Ascension roster needs me, and I can make it better. The most important names would be Dolph Ziggler and Alberto Del Rio, because Ziggler feels like he's entitled to a spot on Raw. He's already said it. He is the face of the company, despite what CM Punk thinks. Del Rio, on the other hand, feels entitled to his spot because he just acts like it's a foregone conclusion that Laurinaitis is going to make him immune and not allow him to go anywhere because he is, in his own eyes at least, the best thing going on Raw. We all know that that's not true, but this is Alberto Del Rio we're talking about. So later on in the night, you would have John Laurinaitis make his way to the ring and say, alright, it's about time that we make this announcement. Let's clear the Raw locker room one more time and bring the roster to the top of the ramp. So they come out, and then, of course, Laurinaitis gets back on the mic, which obviously never is a good thing, but in this case we can make it work. He says something to the effect of, thank you, gentlemen, I've been given the task of choosing 5 men to be immune from being drafted to this new Ascension show, and I think I'm comfortable enough to make my decision now. CM Punk is the WWE Champion, so unfortunately enough, he gets automatic immunity. Punk, you can go ahead back to the locker room. So Punk showboats, holds up the title. Laurinaitis might say something snide about how, oh, he's not immune by choice, it's by force, I can't help it. If it was up to me, you'd be out of here. So, of course, Punk heads back to the locker room. And then Laurinaitis says, in addition to Punk, due to the events of this past pay-per-view TLC, our new United States Champion Zack Ryder is also immune. Zack, go back to the locker room. And again, Ryder showboats. He holds up the LI sign with his hands. He has the belt on his shoulder. He heads to the back. Of course, we might get Laurinaitis telling him something snide again, just like he did with Punk. And then Laurinaitis gets on the mic, and he would be obviously quite agitated at this point, because 2 of the guys that are immune, he probably would have been very happy with shipping to another brand. He says, alright, so now since my so-called choices have already been made for me, I do have 3 actual choices that I get to select remaining. My first choice, and the 3rd man to be immune from the Ascension draft, The Miz. And The Miz's music hits. He gets that, shit-eating grin on his face that he's so infamous for. He thanks Laurinaitis and he heads to the back. When the crowd dies down a little bit, we get Laurinaitis saying, my second choice, and the 4th man to be immune from the Ascension draft, Alberto Del Rio. And Del Rio's music hits. He does that thing where he puts his hands out and shakes them up and down, pointing toward himself like he's the best thing since sliced bread. Maybe he lips the words, you already knew that, and winks to people in the crowd. And then he heads to the back. And then Laurinaitis gets on the mic and says, and my 3rd choice, and the final man to be immune from this Ascension draft, despite some disagreements we may have had in the past, is John Cena. Cena's music hits, and sure, Cena looks a little confused, but he thanks Laurinaitis, he showboats just like everyone else has so far, and he heads to the back. And there you have it. 5 immunities, only 3 of which were actually by choice. Del Rio and Miz are both Laurinaitis guys. He's made it clear on screen that he's a big fan of both of theirs. Cena's a company guy, so it makes sense that the Executive Vice President of Talent Relations would want to keep him on the A show. The unfortunate odd man out for this is Dolph Ziggler, who lost his United States title at TLC, therefore his automatic immunity from this draft, and shortly after the crowd starts to calm down from the announcement that Cena isn't going anywhere, William Regal's music hits and he comes down to the ring. He compliments Laurinaitis on how good of a job he did choosing his superstars, and says that it's his turn to choose his men. As he said earlier, he's been given permission to choose 1 former WWE or World Champion, and obviously he would do that last. So the other 4 are, and he says this in order, Drew McIntyre, Alex Riley, JTG, and Kofi Kingston. Chances are he would do them in that order because it would allow him to get the big pop at the end. Drew McIntyre's first because he's got that split reaction where the internet marks like him and everyone else hates him. Alex Riley is a great babyface, but not quite on the same level as Kofi Kingston. JTG is irrelevant, so he'll calm the crowd down right before the announcement of Kofi, and then Kofi will cause a huge pop. And of course, William Regal has his fifth choice, the former WWE or World Champion. And I've been pointing it out this whole time that it's going to be Dolph Ziggler, so you know that, but the crowd doesn't know that. And so what would end up happening is, because the WWE likes everything to seem a little bit more elaborate than it really is, Regal would narrow it down. He would say, alright, I'm ready to choose my WWE or World Champion from the past. And they would send everybody that's never held one of those titles or has been chosen for this draft to the back. The four remaining men, if you aren't quite sure, would be Dolph Ziggler, Jack Swagger, Kane, and Kevin Nash. Regal would specify how much he loves villains and that he's an old villain himself and he's always admired other true villains. But he would also emphasize that the Ascension brand is about young and upcoming stars that deserve a platform. So he would send Kane and Kevin Nash to the back. Dolph Ziggler and Jack Swagger would be the only ones left. And Mr. Regal would ask Vicky Guerrero who she thinks would be the better choice. Now Vicky's a smart lady, so she knows that whoever she says is probably going to be the one that gets picked. She likes Dolph Ziggler way more, so naturally she does the opposite and says Jack Swagger. William Regal says, I'm happy you said that. You can gladly keep him. My choice is Dolph Ziggler. Everyone on the stage looks angry. Ziggler gets angry. Swagger gets angry. Vicky gets furious. Ziggler gets on a mic and just starts cutting a promo about how much he hates this and are you kidding me? You're putting me on the C show. I'm a raw talent. I'm on the A team. I'm an A-lister. You need to take this scrub instead. He's tall. He doesn't have a lot else going for him, but he is tall. Swagger starts getting angry, and he agrees with Ziggler at first that he needs to keep Ziggler on the A show and take Swagger because Swagger wants to be a big fish in a small pond again like he was in ECW. Then he realizes that Ziggler just called him a scrub and insulted him right in front of him, and he grabs the mic from him and basically just says, "Good riddance," and walks to the back. It's been made pretty clear that Jack Swagger is sick of Dolph Ziggler getting all the attention, and it's pretty clear that because Vicky did what she did, Ziggler is her preferred guy. So Swagger might end up breaking out on his own now. I'm not going to go into that because we need to talk more about this Ascension draft than Raw and where superstars are going on Raw. The following night on NXT, Matt Striker announces that the current NXT roster is going to be able to stick around, but they can only keep 5. He says that unfortunately, since Percy Watson and Titus O'Neil are a tag team, as well as Curt Hawkins and Tyler Reks, we're going to have one from each of those tag teams sticking around, and the other one will be ending up going to either Superstars or one of the main rosters. So we have Percy Watson in a one-on-one match with Titus O'Neil, and Curt Hawkins in a one-on-one match with Tyler Reks. On top of that, they're going to keep Derrick Bateman, Darren Young, and Johnny Curtis. That'll make up 5. And the guys that I have winning matches are Percy Watson and Tyler Reks. The main reason I picked Percy Watson is because I just can't stand Titus O'Neil, and we needed a way to get him off the show because of how many frickin' redemption points the guy has. And this is the only logical way I see of doing it. The reason I chose Tyler Reks over Curt Hawkins is because I like Curt, but he doesn't have the charisma that Tyler Reks does. He doesn't have the look, and he doesn't have the size. So Tyler Reks would be a great choice here, and he could actually end up playing a big role as a monster in the first few months of Ascension. Then on SmackDown that week, they go ahead and they do pretty much the same thing that they did on Raw. Teddy Long's choices for immunity would be Daniel Bryan because he's the World Champion, Cody Rhodes because he's the Intercontinental Champion, Randy Orton because he's the face of the show, Mark Henry and Big Show because they're the #1 contenders. Now, William Regal's choices for SmackDown, and these are most likely pretty obvious. The former WWE/World Champion is going to be Sheamus, which is a pretty huge deal because Sheamus, honestly, I think that if Teddy Long would have gotten a 6th immunity choice, he would have picked Sheamus. And to be completely honest, I think that he probably would have picked Sheamus over Daniel Bryan if he had a choice. But Sheamus is going to this Ascension roster. And in addition to Sheamus, we're also getting Ezekiel Jackson, Ted DiBiase, Heath Slater, and Justin Gabriel. The reason I chose Ezekiel Jackson is because whether you like it or not, the guy can play a good monster. He's got the size, he's got the look. He's one of those few guys on the WWE roster who you look at and say, God, I would not want to mess with that guy. Ted DiBiase, I feel like, has all the potential in the world as a top babyface. And even though I don't think he would be getting the first shot at what we're going to end up making and dubbing the Ascension Championship, he would definitely be #1 contender down the line. And I do think that after the initial heel wins the title, he would be the first guy to win it back. Heath Slater, because A lot like JTG from the last one, we have some of the best whipping boys in the entire business right now in JTG and Heath Slater. So if you need anybody to go out there and look great, that's who you put them against. JTG, Heath Slater. We need to have a bottom of the barrel, even if you do consider this third brand to be a bottom of the barrel brand. I brought Justin Gabriel in because I feel like we don't have enough guys doing high spots on the show. The only thing we really have is Kofi Kingston, and Justin Gabriel and Kofi Kingston would have great chemistry together. The following week, we're going to have Raw, and there's going to be an announcement made that says that the first ever Ascension brand pay-per-view match is going to be to crown the first ever Ascension World Champion. That match should take place at the Elimination Chamber. The Ascension GM and the roster will have just under 2 months to actually figure out who is worthy of being their representatives as champion. Now I know that you're probably thinking to yourself, or at least some of you who have been keeping track are thinking to yourself, wait a minute, we only have 15 guys here. We have the 5 from Raw, the 5 from NXT, and the 5 from SmackDown. You said there were going to be 20 men on the roster. Who's missing? And the answer to that is the FCW guys. These are the guys that this entire show was made for in the first place. We're going to bring in 5 FCW representatives to round the roster out to 20. And while not all 5 of them are actually going to get featured, these 5 guys are going to be the guys that will be getting familiar with the Raw and SmackDown audiences instead of the guys that were on NXT originally. The 5 names are Leo Kruger, Kenneth Cameron, Leakee, Antonio Cesaro, and Seth Rollins. And for those of you who don't know, Antonio Cesaro is better known as Claudio Castagnoli on the independent circuit, and Seth Rollins is better known as Tyler Black on the independent circuit. And those 2 guys are going to be getting more featured than the other 3, but the other 3 are guys that I see in FCW that I think deserve a real shot at getting that opportunity in front of a real live crowd to perform, and not just that crowd in FCW who, pretty much like TNA, probably doesn't even need to pay for the tickets that they get. So now that we have our roster established, if you aren't sure what it is, I'll have it listed in the description box, so if you're not quite sure, or if you want to go ahead and recap it, go ahead and click down there. We can start figuring out who our top guys are. It's pretty clear that our first program for the world title is going to be between Dolph Ziggler and Sheamus. But how are we going to set that up? More importantly, when one of those guys wins the title and then defends it against the guy that he beat for the title at the next pay-per-view, who's first in line? This is all things that we need to establish on this brand, and these are all things that I'm going to leave to later videos, because like any good content creator, I naturally want you all to want to come back. So not this coming Tuesday, December 27th, but the Tuesday after that, January 3rd, I'm going to make another video describing how I would book the first 3 months of the Ascension promotion. Now because it's 3 months, it's going to include the first big pay-per-view match to determine the Ascension World Champion. Not only that, but it's going to include the WrestleMania Ascension brand match, where the World Champion defends it against his #1 contender, most likely the guy that he beat at the Elimination Chamber match. On top of all this, we're going to be building guys up like Antonio Cesaro, like Ted DiBiase, like Seth Rollins, like Leakee, like all these FCW guys. We're going to be making these guys look good. We're going to be giving everybody an opportunity that deserves an opportunity. And we're going to be using the guys like Heath Slater and JTG and Ezekiel Jackson and Drew McIntyre. And we're going to be actually giving these guys something to do, so that they aren't constantly just having meaningless matches on Superstars, and so that they aren't just constantly getting shoved aside for other guys like Jinder Mahal and David Otunga, and even Mason Ryan, who I don't think deserves the shot that the 5 FCW guys on this roster deserve. This coming Sunday, I'm going to be doing my end of the year awards, where I'm going to be giving out awards that aren't necessarily going to parallel the Slammies, but are going to be similar to the Slammies. The awards are including, but not limited to, Superstar of the Year, Match of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, Heel of the Year, Diva of the Year, and many, many more. And something that I do want to emphasize is that those awards are not WWE only, so don't expect the Tag Team of the Year to go to Air Boom. This is Eon Izzle, signing out.